Hey there, PCL fans, this is Claydol26 coming at you with a new video. We're going to go through Tier 5 in the Draft League. We aren't so bad. I'm going to make this a video series where I will go through each of the different tiers and kind of tell you what's good about each tier, what you should be looking for, and then at the end I will list my personal top 10. And with these top 10, it's just my personal feeling, what I like and what I look for in draft, and it's not necessarily the best. I wouldn't say they are the best, but they're definitely really, really good. So here we go, starting with some of the kind of usage, what you should be looking for in Tier 5. So first off, this is the tier. I'm not going to go through all of these. Tier 5 is the largest tier. On top of all of these Pokemon, you can use any Little Cup Pokemon as well in Tier 5. So it just makes it super huge, super diverse, and I think for a lot of people that can make it really intimidating, trying to figure out, oh shoot, what should I pick? So that's why I wanted to start with Tier 5 before any of the other tiers, just because I think people struggle with it a lot. People don't really know like what they should be picking really, and kind of just take something that they think, oh, this seems kind of okay, instead of really looking at what their team needs. So I'm going to kind of go through first, like, team needs and like how you can find your team needs in here when you're drafting. So again, the important thing is rounding out your team. When you get to Tier 5, which you should not be drafting super early, but when you get to Tier 5, you should be thinking, okay, what am I missing? What did I not get in draft? How can I make up for that? What can I kind of tweak a little bit and throw on here that can give me a little more of an edge in the battle? So I'll start with hazards. If you missed some good hazard setters early, there's still really good options in Tier 5. Probopass, Mesprit, Weezing, and Claydol are all really, really strong. Some of my favorites. I threw a bunch of other ones on here. Masquerain is one, though, that I really think is underrated. Sticky webs is not a very common thing that people run, but it can be very good. And on top of the sticky webs, Masquerain gets Intimidate. So when you switch Masquerain in, a lot of times the opponent's going to switch out. And that forced switch gives you the perfect opportunity to set up those sticky webs. So I think Masquerain is a little underrated. It didn't quite make my top 10, but it's one to really look at. And then for hazard control, there's a lot of options there too for defog and rapid spin. Basically, you've got Claydol, Avalugg, Skuntank. Xatu has magic bounce, which is really good. Komala, Oricorio, and then even some of the smaller guys here, Hitmonchan and Armaldo have rapid spin. They're pretty decent. Driftblim and Shiftry both get defog, so those are really strong. Everything that I do list on here, by the way, is something I consider decent enough that people should draft. I'm not listing all the different rapid spin users. There's plenty others, and there's plenty other defoggers that I didn't put on here because I don't think they're quite good enough in Tier 5 to use. But the ones I listed here, they're pretty decent and could really help out your team if this is something that you need. If you're looking for more offense on your team, there's plenty of setup users. Carracosta, Ninjask, Lycanroc Day. Jinx is one I picked up this season. She has options with Nasty Plot, which is really good. She also is really good with a Scarf. I think Jinx is pretty powerful. I'm excited to use her. Kling Klang, which we actually moved down from Tier 4 to Tier 5. He gets some setup. Mr. Mime, Crustle. Again, you could go on through this list. There's a lot. Wall breakers. There's some really good wall breakers if you need it. If people are starting, near the end of draft to really pull some heavy stall, pick up one of these guys if you need the offensive help. Aggron is crazy good at wall breaking. Aurorus, Drampa, Jinx, Crabominable, Pyroar, Stoutland, Mudsdale, all really good options to just give you that little bit of power. So then, as far as just overall offensive pressure, I wanted to mention a couple other ones. Archeops is really strong. If you run Roost, that really helps out the ability. He is a little limited because of his ability, but I think Roost gives him enough power. Both the Lycanrocs, Day and Night, are super good. They have great abilities. I think it's the abilities that really make them stand out. Stoutland, Aurorus, Jinx, I already mentioned them a lot. Floatzel, Pyroar, even Dodrio, who we moved down from Tier 4, still really good. Rampardos can be okay, especially wall breaking, and then Granbull. Again, the Intimidate, it's really good. U-turns and overall bulk. So U-turn and volt switch are super important, I think. If you don't have them on your team, you might struggle a bit with good switches and putting on some of that pressure. So some things you can even look for in tier 5 are Mesprit, liepard, Zebstrika, Archeops gets U-turn, Probopass, Komala, Ninjask, on and on and on. There's so many. A lot of things get U-turn and volt switch that I don't think people realize. So it's something to really look into. And if you need more defense, if you're building a bulky stall team, or if you're going for just balance and you want some switch-ins, there's Musharna, Weezing, Spiritomb, Carbink, Extra Large, Gourgeist, Claydol, one of my favorites, Dino, Girder, you know, so many others. You can go on and on down this list, but there's options, and everything I listed here I think is good enough to take, you know? You just have to make sure you make the right builds and there's the kind of right fit for your team. Weather. You can take weather late too. Politoed, one of the best rain setters, is down in tier 5. Abomasnow and Aurorus can set hail. Ninetales, if you need the sunny day. And then Mesprit and liepard can actually set weather, which is really interesting. They're actually pretty decent at it too. And then if you already drafted weather early, there's a bunch of Pokemon you can take later. If you drafted Tyranitar, Stoutland is super good to take in tier 5. The Sandrush is really good, and he has great attack. Alolan Sandslash is a great addition if you already got some hail going. Otherwise, Alolan Sandslash is really bad, so I wouldn't take him outside of having hail already. Lycanroc Day, super good in the sand, and then you've got Chlorophyll users. Lilligant and Victory Bell are not terrible. Shiftry is pretty good. And then Bararctic and Ludicolo, again, like, you can just abuse your weather if you already drafted it. If you didn't already draft weather, some of these might not be the greatest picks to take. But it's something to look at. Trick Room I think is huge with tier 5. If you're trying to build some sort of slow team, or you seem to already have a slow team and you just want to like toss in that Trick Room, Carbink, Alolan Exeggutor, Gourgeist, Claydol are all super strong at setting Trick Room. So those are really pretty decent options to do it. Abusers, I listed a few here, but I mean the speed tiers in tier 5 are pretty low, so you can take just about anything. But when you're looking for raw power, Exeggutor, Wishy-Washy, Rampardos, Crabominable, and Golurk were my top choices for a Trick Room if I had to do one. Golurk I think is super fun and underrated. He didn't quite make my top 5, but I mean he gets Stealth Rock. He's got No Guard, which is super good. And then Intimidate users, I don't think people look at enough. Intimidate's really strong in draft, being able to force your opponent out. So Granbull, Stoutland, Luxray, and Masquerain, all really good picks. I would take all of those Pokemon. I think they're pretty great. So now I'm going to go on to my top 10. These are just my personal favorite. I think they're really good and really useful. But again, this is just my opinion on this. Some of them might be outclassed by some other tier 5s that maybe I didn't look at hard enough. And also there are quite a few rock types. I do think tier 5 is where rock types shine a lot, but many of you know rock is my favorite type. I've used them a lot, so I know the potential of a lot of them, so be ready for that. Start with number 10, Aurorus. Aurorus is one of my favorite fossils. She's so pretty. But outside of that, I mean, her hit point stat is really, really good. She also gets a very wide move pool and 2 really, really strong abilities. She gets Stealth Rock, she gets Freeze Dry and Encore, and then with the abilities, you get Refrigerate, so you can run Hyper Voice and stuff like that, and you get Snow Warning, so she can be a hail setter. The thing about Aurorus is there's not just one set. People aren't going to be like, oh, you're running Aurorus, I know exactly what it's running, I can plan for that. It really doesn't. It has options that I don't think people realize, and I think that's really good. That's very good in draft. And the bulk is decent. Obviously, the speed tier's not great, but she's not there to be fast. She can also be a decent wall breaker with choice specs. 99 special attack is nothing to scoff at. So definitely something to really consider in your draft if you need a special wall breaker, if you need a Stealth Rock user, or just some ice power on your team. I did put near the bottom 2 Mons that almost made my top 10. They were close with Aurorus. I kind of had to decide between the 3 which one to put, and I put Aurorus above Jinx and Mr. Mime just because it had more options and more versatility in draft. So I put that up a little higher. Sadly, Jinx and Mr. Mime didn't make it, but almost did. They're still really, really strong and should be drafted. Oricorio is my number 9. Oricorio is only on this list because of the versatility of typing. We did vote last season whether we wanted to separate the types into 4 different Pokemon or keep them all as one and let whoever drafts it choose. We decided to let people choose. And I think that really pays off for it and makes it not only draftable, but top 10 tier 5 draftable in my opinion. It's got Defog, Roost, Calm Mind for setting up, and that Calm Mind is with 98 special attack. That's pretty good. They all get Hurricane and U-Turn for momentum. Like, they've got a lot going for them. The stats aren't the best, but it's the typing. You can switch up that typing for every match, throw off your opponent, bring which one is going to be good, try to throw your opponent off and not be able to guess what you're bringing. That's so important for draft, and I think puts them above and beyond what is expected from a lot of tier 5 Pokemon. I was personally surprised we decided to not separate them all just because of how we have Rotom separated. I feel like it's very similar, but that's just how it is. They're all the same. They're definitely weaker than Rotom, so there's that. But if you need a Defogger or a Calm Mind user or Oricorio, it's a very good way to go. Really, really strong. Throw off your opponent. Number 8 is one of my favorite setup sweepers, Carracosta. Carracosta has a lot going for it. It's not quite obviously as strong as Cloyster or Amistar as far as a Shell Smasher. And then with Barbaracle, it gets tricky. I think the Tough Claws does help Barbaracle, but Carracosta gets something that all those other ones don't, and that is Aqua Jet. Aqua Jet with Shell Smash is really, really strong. And even though the speed tier is pretty low, again, the priority helps. You get Swift Swim if you have any rain users. And its other 2 abilities are really good. You get Sturdy and Solid Rock. Either one of those, you're going to either guarantee you live or you're going to tank a lot of hits that aren't grass, obviously. He also gets Stealth Rock and Knockoff. Again, 2 really strong moves in draft. Knockoff is super important. Really throws the team off. And then his special attack is not terrible. 83 after a Shell Smash is super strong. So Hydro Pump is a really good option to throw a mixed set on Carracosta and really throw off your opponent. I do think he got drafted in at least one of our leagues this season, so I'm really happy for that. I hope I get to see him. If you need some offensive pressure, you need to throw another Stealth Rocker on your team, Carracosta might be a good way to do that. Highly, highly recommend taking him. He is a great little turtle. Probopass, number 7. So, I said there'd be quite a few rocks. I think this is the last one, though. But, I talk a lot about Probopass. I use him a lot with my rock gym team, because I love rock monotype. He's so good, and he's so much better than people give him credit for. Probopass has a lot going for him. He's one of the best stealth rock setters, in my opinion, even outside of tier 5. Like, the way he can do it with Thunder Wave Stealth Rock is really good, unless he's up against a ground type that sucks, but if he's not, boom, T-Wave Stealth Rock. You're getting it up there every time. And then if they're paralyzed, you get Volt Switch as a switch out. He gets Sturdy. Obviously, that helps a lot with setting Stealth Rock. If you don't run Sturdy, you can run Magnet Pull. He can work as a little mini Magnezone, trap things in, run Hidden Power Fire. His special attack's not amazing, but it's high enough that it's going to do some damage. He's a great trapper for, like, Scizor. Like, he can do a lot with that. And then he also gets Taunt and Magic Coat. Again, he's such a good utility mon. He can do a lot of fun things. If you need the utility, if you need the Stealth Rocks or a slow Volt Switch, pick up Probopass. He's so strong and so, again, underrated. I think people don't look hard enough just because it's like, oh, it's Rock and Steel, like 2 times weak to Earthquake or fighting, you know. I think he's better than that, and people should really give Probopass a chance. I always want to take him in draft. I just never have the space. I always draft a Stealth Rocker early, and usually get a Volt Switch earlier too. But if I never did, like, I really want to get him someday, just to show people what he does. He's so good. So, Skuntank. Skuntank is number 6. He goes in every draft, and it's because he's one of the best defoggers. I mean, just one of the best for getting rid of hazards in the game, because he's also poison type. Like, boom, there goes your toxic spikes. You don't even need a defog. But having defog and not being weak to Stealth Rock is pretty rare. Sizor's one of the other ones I know that can. Like, that's just so good to be able to switch in, not take too much damage, and defog the Stealth Rock away is really important. He gets Aftermath as an ability. It's not terrible. Sucker Punch and Pursuit for priority, Haze and Taunt. He has utility options. He also gets Fire Blast and Play Rough as coverage, which is super strong. But, I mean, obviously the defog is what really sets him apart and what put him so high on my list. I just think that's super strong. If you didn't get a good defog early, there are options. Number 5, we are going to Stoutland. Stoutland did get drafted late this season. And he's super good. Look at that attack stat. I mean, 110 attack, 80 speed. Crazy good. He gets Intimidate and Sand Rush. Intimidate obviously helps push people out. But Sand Rush, man, you throw him with Tyranitar or Hippo, and this thing goes nuts with that 80 speed. He's a good wall breaker. He's a good cleaner. But what really made me put Stoutland so high on the list, I originally had him higher until I looked through all of his coverage. Oh my goodness! Ice Fang, Fire Fang, Superpower, Play Rough, Iron Head, and Psychic Fangs outside of his regular normal type moves. Like, wow! You can bring so much, like, coverage. You can be prepared for anything with Stoutland, which is why he is super scary, and people should be afraid if someone brings this into the draft, because you don't know what it's gonna do. You don't know what move it's gonna throw at you. So I think that's really important. He's easily one of the best offensive mons in tier 5. He's just so crazy strong. Alright, Claydol. Claydol gets drafted every single season, so I don't think you need me to say it, but Claydol is good. Best spinner in tier 5. If you didn't get Excadrill, Starmie, Delmise, or Serena, I think Claydol is the next best bet for spinning. So good. He gets Levitate, super important. He can run dual screens and Stealth Rock. And he does have decent coverage. His offensive power might not be great, but you know people are going to switch a water type in on him. Something like that. And you get Grass Knot. Just slap Grass Knot on him. Do a little damage before you switch out or something. Like, it's pretty decent. But, I mean, overall, you're using him as a rapid spinner, which is really good. He's one of the better ones, and should always get drafted. He always does, though, so I think this is one of the ones that I don't really need to tell people too much about. He's good. Liepard. Liepard doesn't get drafted very often, and I think it should. It's so high on the list, not obviously because of its stats. Its stats are like, they're okay. They're not great. But its versatility. Like, Liepard can do a lot. It gets Prankster for one. That's so good. Prankster with Thunder Wave. Like, really great. It gets Fake Out, which is a great open. Obviously, it's good for the chip damage. Stab Knockoff and U-Turn. Sucker Punch and Pursuit priority. Not that it needs it too much. Its speed tier is actually pretty decent. Nasty Plot, I think, is a great set to run on a Liepard to really throw someone off. With the speed it has, run Nasty Plot and start sweeping. And it can set weather. I found that out and thought that was actually pretty crazy. With the Prankster, you can get Rain Dance and Sunny Day up pretty quick. So that's actually surprising and scary if you need it. So Liepard, yeah, if you need some versatility on your team, you don't know exactly what you need. If you need U-Turn, some Fake Out or Stab Knockoff, I think Liepard is easily worth a spot on anyone's team. I think it's crazy good. Weezing is number 2. Weezing is personally my favorite Gen 1 for starters. I love Weezing. But it's so good in tier 5. It's a great physical wall. It can set toxic spikes, which it recently got, I believe, in Gen 6. And, I mean, the haze is good. Will-O-Wisp. Will-O-Wisp is so strong. I can't reiterate that enough. Will-O-Wisp is good. Just taking the offensive pressure off. Pain Split is decent recovery. That's usually what I run on Weezing. He also gets 2 really good coverage moves for his switch-ins. Fire Blast hits steel types really hard, especially anyone switching in a Sizor. Like, that Fire Blast can probably just about KO. 85 special attack is not great, but it's gonna put a dent in it. And then Shadow Ball, because Weezing's only weakness with Levitate is Psychic. Throw Shadow Ball on there, and boom, you start hitting its switch-ins pretty hard before you switch out. Just that chip damage really helps. Overall, I mean, I think he makes my number 2 just because he's great at what he does, and he has options. He's not just always going to run the same move set. It is more limited than some other ones maybe, but I still think that just his stats and his coverage put him a little higher than a lot of others. So now, my number 1, that I don't think is going to stay number 1, because I think it's going to get shifted to tier 4 in the coming seasons, but it is Mesprit. Mesprit is insane. When I was going through this list, I stopped at Mesprit. I knew it was going to be my number 1 choice already, but I don't feel like I ever actually sat down and looked at all its stats, all its coverage. And after seeing it, I was like, how the hell is this thing tier 5? Look at those stats. That thing is insane. Mesprit should not be tier 5, but it is for right now. Stealth Rock, U-Turn, Calm Mind, Knockoff, Healing Wish. Those are just kind of the basics. It's coverage, Ice Beam, Dazzling Gleam, Signal Beam, and any hidden power is going to hit pretty hard. It can set weather, just like liepard. It's got weather options as well. There's not much more else to say. You look at that, you look at the stats. Mesprit's an absolute monster and got drafted really early in both leagues. Not surprising. A couple people obviously know they're tier 5 and are paying attention to what's going on. And, I mean, we've talked about it, and I do think Mesprit's changing. But for now, from the time this video was made, Mesprit was tier 5, and it rules tier 5. But I think things will shift next season. So that is it for my tier 5. Hopefully this was informative, helped you guys maybe look at tier 5 a little differently, and help you make some choices, because I know tier 5 can be a little tough to manage, a little tough to draft correctly. Just make sure you're looking at, what does my team need? Not just these top 10 that I listed, but what does your team need? And go from there and look through and figure out what's good enough to fill that slot on your team. So I will make this a video series. Next time I will be doing tier 4. We'll find the right balance. I do think tier 4 is my least favorite. It's just a weird tier. Because we get 2 from tier 3, and obviously tier 5 there's enough decent stuff you can pick up what you need, but what should we be looking for in tier 4 is kind of what I am going to go over next time. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope it was informative, and I will see you all next time. Later.